Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins of El Paso Community College Television. Maybe I look a little bit like I'm from Mexico. I tell people all the time I'm a gringo, but mi corazón is mexicano. I love Mexican music and food and the culture, the border culture here. 5 years ago, I had the guest that I have back today, Armando.
Nice to see you again.
Armando Velez, editor of El Diario del Paso. 5 years ago, Armando and I had a discussion about journalism and how you got into journalism and working in a dangerous country for journalists at that time. And Charlie Meehan, a friend of ours that I had on the show, did a movie, 8 Murders a Day, things like that. So that was something of our discussion. But here we are 5 years later, and I want to set up a hypothetical. Let's assume that you and I, on June the 16th, 2015, we're sitting in a modest home over in Juarez. The radio is there. At some point we've been discussing and they're offering us coffee and so on. And we turn on the radio and we hear this coming across the radio. Donald Trump. Listen.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East.
And now that we've heard this playback, that was just 1 minute and 25 seconds about Donald Trump and his attitude about Mexico. When you and I heard that in that house over there, what was your response? What did you say to your workers at the office?
Well, at that time, I would say, don't worry, he's a crazy madman. So don't worry much about it, because he has no chances to become the next president of the United States.
You know, it's kind of interesting because I was teaching at community college full-time then, going into my classes when he announced, he came down an escalator, we had the vision in our mind, it came down the escalator and then he started saying these things about Mexicans and Muslims and so on. And my students began to ask me, Mr. Blevins, do you think Donald Trump could get elected as president? I had a different reaction than you had. I said, yes, I think he could, because this is an age where people want to just be amused. It's an age in which people are all uptight about celebrities. They worship celebrities. It's almost some of them like cult leaders or something. And I said, the age of tabloids, and we become a much more mean-spirited and vulgar country. And Donald Trump is a mean-spirited and vulgar man. It wouldn't surprise me if he became president of the United States. That was my prophecy.
Right.
Oh my goodness, I wish it had been more like yours than
Well,
mine.
probably I was in denial.
You were in denial.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what kind of editorials or articles did you start writing about him?
Well, actually, it's a very complicated situation because, as you said, he's an entertainer. He knows how to find the exact words to express, to spread his message, and he uses a very, very limited vocabulary.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but he knows how to reach the masses, and those masses who are looking for a scapegoat. And in this case, the scapegoat is Mexico, or Mexico and the Muslim countries, and basically the non-white people. And I think that rhetoric works because he is targeting people in the Rust Belt who have no contact with Mexicans or Hispanics. But here in the border, you realize that that's completely false, or that is false, because here we have over 70% of the population are are Hispanics, and you find people, very successful people, business people, artists, professors, very successful Hispanic people, and that situation invalids Donald Trump's arguments against the Mexicans.
Right. Now, you mentioned the Rust Belt. Donald Trump, playing to the Rust Belt, began to talk about NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, which caused great growth here on the border. A lot of production taking place over in Juarez and other parts of Mexico, brought over here and then transported around the world. What did you hear about that when Donald Trump began to say he's going to kill NAFTA or renegotiate NAFTA?
Well, I think he is doing something against the U.S. economy, because NAFTA has brought growth to the border region. Okay, it is true that some jobs have gone or have evolved, because like in the 50s or even during the 70s, here in El Paso there were a lot of garment industry.
Right.
Now that industry is gone to Mexico or to other countries.
Right.
But the U.S. provides logistics and other services.
And a lot of electronics things on this side of the border. Software.
Software, yeah. Because the U.S. Has evolved into a more complex economy. So the interaction between Mexico, the U.S., Canada is very beneficial, because one country produces milk, the other produces meat, and we together get the hamburger.
It's a complex economic system.
Right, and the cars. Mexico has become a major country for assembling cars.
It provides jobs.
Yes, it provides jobs, and Laredo is the busiest port for trade, for international trade between Mexico and the U.S., and the second one is El Paso.
All right. Okay, then another question. This is just a 28-minute show, so we have so many things we can talk about. One of the phrases that Donald Trump picked up from a couple of advisors when he started campaigning for president, and he was attacking Mexicans, they said, why don't you talk about building a wall between the United States and Mexico? Let's stop. And they kept hearing about people dying in the desert and things like this, trying to get into the United States. And so he began to use this phrase, build a wall. And he had people chanting, build the wall. And then he would say, and who's going to pay for it?
Mexico.
Mexico's going to pay for it. I began to say, how is he going to make Mexico pay for it? Build a wall over here, and then make another country pay for our wall? How did you journalists react to that?
It's
the madman.
Yeah, it's nonsense. Because I've tried to figure it out, but then you realize that it's nonsense.
Okay.
Because it's like if you own a home, you can put a fence or a wall, but you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
That's it. But you know, in politics, you sometimes you try to go to the irrational part of the mind.
Hyperbole, exaggerate.
Right. Yeah, you are campaigning. The problem is that Mr. Trump is still campaigning, and when he loses touch with his base, he renews the attacks against Mexico or against other countries.
Well, now then we have this issue that just came up. Well, it came up when George Bush was president and when Obama was president. And they used some National Guard troops approved by the states, such as Texas and New Mexico, in order to assist the Border Patrol with regard to logistics, electronic surveillance, and things of that nature, helicopters flying over and looking down and photographing. But Donald Trump now has raised the issue of sending troops to the border, the regular military to the border. And in your paper this morning, here is the cover. You want to read it for us?
Okay, they see unnecessary and expensive to militarize the border.
Okay, that's yours. In the El Paso Times today, it's on the third page, and it's a very small article with a very small headline there. But of course, there have been other articles about this possibility of the military coming to the border. When this came up with Bush and Obama, I began to ask my students, how would you feel about soldiers lined up along the border with their machine guns pointing toward Mexico? Trump has made a point, and this has been a big point for many years, is catch and return. Simply catch them and simply take them back and drop them off in the middle of the bridge, back to the other side of the border. Well, then how do you do it unless you start shooting them? We haven't shot Mexicans in a war since the Mexican-American War of the 1840s. What would happen?
Well, it would create, it could even start a war. Well, that's the worst case scenario.
Right.
But, okay, through the history of the border, we have seen many things happening, like the confrontation between the U.S. and Mexico, the U.S. invading Mexico,
Right.
The U.S. sending troops to look for Pancho Villa,
Right.
and then we find the cooperation. And I think that above all these scenarios, the cooperation, economic cooperation between the two countries, it has given the best results in the development of both countries.
Yeah, diplomacy and economic interactions have been much better than going to war.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. Well, then how do we deal with this? How do you deal with what you refer to as a madman with some of these suggestions? What are the kind of editorial statements that your paper is making?
Well, actually, we defend the immigrants, and we want to find a way to give a legal status to the immigrants who are here for years, and many of them have settled down in the U.S., have families, have children, grandchildren, and they are beneficial for the society because they work and they pay taxes.
Yeah. Well, on what we heard here on the radio, Trump saying Mexico sends us their worst. I've not thought about Mexico sending these people. I think about these being poor people looking for economic opportunity wherever they can find it. And they make more money on this side of the border. Now, I just did a program recently with the historic preservationist for the city of Socorro. And Socorro was one of the embarkation points for the Bracero program for a number of years following World War II, up and until the late 50s or so. And I remember the Bracero program as a young person and these Mexicans coming to work. We're even hearing now it's hard to get Americans to do these agricultural temporary periods of time jobs because they're moving from crops to crop. I taught close to El Centro one year. Students told me, we'll only be here half a year. We work the lettuce and the carrots during the fall, and then we move up around Santa Rosa in Northern California and work the berries. So it always affected their education, and many words who drop out of school and go to work for the family. Don't you still find this a problem in Mexico? Young people not being encouraged sometimes to get an education, but simply help make money to support the family?
Yes, we hear a lot of stories like that, and even within within Mexico, there are many migrants from poor states like Oaxaca, and they go to Baja California to work in the crops, and then they go to Sinaloa to work in other crops. And actually, a study by the Pew Hispanic Centers revealed 1 year or 2 years ago that the immigration flux into the U.S. from Mexico is negative. There are more Mexicans going back to Mexico than Mexicans coming to the States.
Right. Oh my, it's such a complex issue. Really, very complex issue. But we have to deal with it. If we don't deal with it, it gets even worse.
Definitely, because, okay, They did the amnesty in 1986 during Donald Reagan's presidency.
Right.
And then, okay, but they didn't solve the basics, because if people still were hungry and jobless and hopeless, they had to come over to the States.
Right.
If you develop the economy of the countries like Mexico or Central America, okay, you will stop having that flow, or you can regulate that flow. But you have to be realistic, and I think that politicians are not realistic, because reality it doesn't make you win a campaign.
Right. Now, one last one, maybe I guess we should deal with, that's made a lot of news, is those that were coming over when they had children. The children, under our Constitution, became American citizens. Many of those children now are in their teens or 20s, and some even in their 30s. And so when Obama was president, he issued an executive order called DACA, a deferred action on these people. And Trump comes in and he says he's getting rid of DACA. Then he says he's going to work with the Congress for DACA if they'll make a bargain with him to build the wall. He'll say, okay, we will let these people, we'll increase the number that can stay, and we will let them stay if you'll just give me money to build my big and beautiful wall. So DACA is still tied up in the politics of Mexico and the United States. What are you writing about DACA?
Well, we write a lot of stories of DACA recipients. We have met many dreamers, as they call them, and we have written about their lives, because I see their lives fascinating as a journalist, because some of them are very politically aware of their situation, and they are fighting, and they are productive, and they love this country because they were raised in the U.S. and since they cannot go back to Mexico or to other countries, basically this is where they are and where their life is. So I think it would be very, very cruel to send them back to a country they've never been to.
Well, originally Donald Trump said he would only send back criminals or people with criminal records, send them back to their country of origin, Mexico, Honduras, Salvador, or so on. But in recent days, it's not just been those that are listed as criminals, it's been ordinary families been breaking up and sending someone back. Can you imagine 800,000 people that are covered under this being deported, most of them to countries they've never known? Some don't even speak the language of the country. Are you writing human interest stories about that?
Yeah, we've done many stories about it. Because it's very hard, that situation. Yeah, as you said, many of them don't speak Spanish at all.
Right.
And basically, and the thing is that, okay, when they talk about sending back only criminals, the problem is that the laws can be interpreted in different ways. So so basically, if you don't have a driver's license, they start investigating you. Or if you did a minor offense, that minor offense can put you in risk of being expelled from the U.S. A U.S. citizen can do exactly the same, and he's still here, but an immigrant will be treated as a second-class person.
Well, do you think if a number of these begin to be deported back, that humanitarian groups in those, say, Juarez or Monterrey or Mexico City would step forward and help these people?
Some people are helping those people.
They're already doing it.
Yes, and also some of them are getting their college degrees in Mexico. And I think they can, if Mexico or other countries gives them a hand, they can be very useful for the country because they know how to do business with the Americans.
Right. Now, some of these people have served in the military of the U.S. government, and they're talking about deporting them back to wherever their parents came from. Wouldn't this give the United States a so-called black eye around the world if they show these scenes of these families being broken up and people being sent to countries they've never lived in?
Yeah, definitely the perception of the U.S. in the world has changed for bad during Trump's presidency.
Okay. Now, your current president, what's the name of your current president?
Enrique Peña Nieto.
Okay. And he's had confrontations with Donald Trump with regard to Trump putting pressure on him. Trump met with him at one point, and then later the president of Mexico said, I'm not going to meet with you this next time, and so on. Almost like school children having a fight, a petty fight. That's a part of the news also. And then you're right now in a presidential campaign. Who is the leader in the presidential campaign right now?
Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
Obrador.
Yes.
All right. Are some of these kinds of issues coming up about Donald Trump in the presidential campaign now taking place?
Yes, because López Obrador represents a nationalistic position. So he said, okay, Mexico is nobody's piñata.
Nobody's piñata.
Yeah. So, and he started his campaign in Juarez last Sunday. And that's very symbolic because Juarez is the border, and the border has special issues, and the border is where the two civilizations, I could say clash,
right.
or you can say the two civilizations live together, coexist.
Exactly. That's what makes El Paso Juarez an interesting place to live. People always asking me, including relatives in other states, about how I feel about living in El Paso. And some of them have expressed concern that I live here with all these Mexicans, because some of them, they think Mexicans are dangerous. And yet you and I and others say, look, El Paso is listed as one of the safest cities in the United States. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But Juarez has had its problems with the cartels, the drug cartels, and the transportation arteries that they want to keep open to bring things into the United States. Drugs in the United States, guns to Mexico. And so it's a terrible relationship. But there's another case where we have to deal with it, or it will eat us up. We will destroy our civilization if we don't bring, in a sense, law and order in a reasonable way and with justice out of this situation. Any other issues I've overlooked that you think are big ones that your paper has been writing about in the last 5 years?
Well, unfortunately, there's been a hike in the violence in the state of Chihuahua. And
it's coming back?
It's coming back.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and now many of the murders are committed in the mountains next to Sinaloa or Sonora, because in those places, in that area, there's a lot of drugs that are cultivated or transported through those areas.
Well, I know when I interviewed you 5 years ago that some of your journalists had been killed, or your photographers had been killed there in Mexico, and you have El Diario in Juarez, and you have El Diario del Paso here. So it seemed to calm down some for a while, and now it's creeping back up with more and more violence. What kind of special instructions are you giving to, or trying to give protection to some of your workers out there in the field?
Well, now we try to go to the crime scene in groups, because in the past you could get to the crime scene before the police,
right.
and you could meet the killers.
The killers would see you, and your life then would be in danger.
Right. And now many of the stories don't have a byline.
Okay.
Because that's a way to protect, to not to tell the people who's writing a story that could place a life in danger.
Oh, and that's sad too. And some of the probably photographs, you can't put the name of the photographer.
Right.
Oh, so it's changed the very nature of journalism.
Yeah, but you need to save lives.
Right. And you need to tell what is happening.
Yes.
You don't want to just be a propaganda tool for the state. You want to be a free, expressive journalism so people can know really what is happening.
Yeah, because otherwise journalism loses its purpose.
You become a press agent for the government.
Right.
Okay, time is about gone. Let's see, we have about, 3 minutes left? What's been the most interesting story? One most interesting story that you've written in the last 5 years since I last had you on the show? Or most important
The
story?
most it could be Trump winning the election, or it could be the Pope visiting Juarez.
The Pope visiting Juarez?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get to meet the Pope, or did you get to visit the scene where they built that special stage for him?
Yeah, we saw the scene. As an editor, you have some privileges, but sometimes you have to be in the newsroom, so you're not
Right.
in the field. Yeah, but it was a historical event, and I think that, as we said a few minutes ago, Juarez and El Paso are a very interesting community, and the eyes of the world are focused in this region.
Right. And this is a special thing about the Spanish coming through here, and the Mexican history, and so many Hispanics being Catholic. And so it is significant to them that the Pope comes and visits this close
Right, it's
to
close.
El Paso.
And the other thing, it could be because we were in the newsroom and we saw the election results, and Trump was winning one state after the other, and the electoral votes, and it was a little shocking because it changed many things. Even though laws have not been changed, the attitude of some officials have changed.
Well, that's important. Well, our time is gone. Armando, glad to have you back on the show again. And I wish we had better news to report, but you're working at it, and you report not only the bad news, but also the good news for us. And thank you for that. And thank you for watching Perspectives El Paso. Once again, I'm Professor Blevins.